Welcome to the Summer of Stories, an interview series that goes behind the brands of entrepreneurs who were the first to do it in their families, communities, and/or industries, and uncovers the stories that embolden them to get it done. I'm Gabrielle Gwyneth, and our guest today is Dr. Carrie Graham, a trailblazer in adult learning, helping businesses enhance their trainings through her unique blend of strategic planning and compassionate training development. With a PhD in adult learning theory, Carrie turns complex research into practical strategies, creating engaging learning experiences that adults retain and apply. She is dedicated to showing that learning happens everywhere, and she's committed to equipping learning and talent development professionals with effective and interesting trainings so their employees and clients perform at their best. Welcome, Carrie. It is so good to have you with us.
Oh, Gabrielle, thank you so much for having me. I have been waiting for this all summer, and so
Yay!
I am really looking forward to see where our conversation goes and what you help me remember. That's always
Yeah. I'm so glad you're excited. So where I want us to start is with this idea of learning, meaning being uncomfortable and getting out of your comfort zone, stretching yourself. And so you're often asking your clients to do this, to be uncomfortable, or to ask their employees or their clients to be uncomfortable. But I also know that you are often willing to go first yourself to
yeah.
set the pace, to help people to feel comfortable. And sometimes this means literally taking the leap, like when you went bungee jumping. So please tell us, was that on your bucket list? How did that come about?
No, the bungee jumping was not on my bucket list. I So for those who may not know the full story, I was traveling with a group of basketball players in Australia, and there were two sets of sisters. One set really wanted to go bungee jumping with the rest of their team, but they just wouldn't do it. Like they were afraid and such. And again, it was not on my bucket list. Gabrielle, everyone, it was not on my bucket list. Um, but I recognized that they would probably never have an opportunity to go to visit Australia again. And I said, I just kind of went up to them and said, hey, if I do it, would you do it? And they looked at me and they were like, Carrie, really? You would do that? And I was like, absolutely, I will. Right. Like just trying to in an effort to encourage them, right, to do something that they were uncomfortable and afraid to do. And I'm just walking up the I felt like a million steps. And I get up there and I'm like, oh my goodness. I just told these people I am going to jump for them. Right. Like, and so I did it. Now, granted, it took like 3 counts of a countdown for me to actually take the leap, but I did. And that happened early. And the sisters did end up jumping. But that happened early on in my career. And for me, it's always been a good reminder of I can't ask or encourage someone to do anything that I'm unwilling to do myself. And it really was a great lesson for me. And so I incorporate that in all facets of my life. That if I'm going to ask someone to do something or consider, right, even just consider another perspective, I always put myself out there first. And I've found that that really gets the buy-in, and it gets people to say, okay, if she's willing to put herself out there, like I can do it too.
Yeah. So after you jumped, well, two questions. While you were jumping, when you finally made it to the countdown, were you thinking on your way down? Because you're free falling when you bungee jump until you get yanked back, right?
You are. Yes, you are.
How are you feeling? And then when it was all done and your students had taken the jump as well, did you have a conversation about that afterwards?
There were no thoughts. There were no thoughts happening in my brain. Like, let me be clear, fully transparent. I was having no thoughts. I think a couple of expletives may have come out of my mouth
That makes sense.
while I was free falling. But no, I wasn't thinking anything. Although while I was on the platform, and the young man was like, okay, when I get to 3 or when I get to 1, you're gonna jump out. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And he's like, 3, 2, 1, and I was still standing there like,
This can't be the one that you mean.
oh, right, right. Like I was literally just standing there, and he like put his face in front of me. And he's like, and I was like, nope, we got to try it again. But it's, there was never conversation. And so even with those students or those athletes, it wasn't a teaching moment, right? Like the moment, like there was teaching happening for them that I didn't need to say anything. For me, the joy was watching them afterwards, right? With their teammates, looking at the pictures like, oh my gosh, we did it. That I didn't think that there needed to be any discussion. Now, I will say with my over the 20 plus years since that time, and with my clients now, yes, sometimes there is a conversation afterwards, but I don't ever want to get, in an effort to say, did you learn the lesson? Get in the way of excitement, right? Or get in the way of deep thinking on their part. And so I manage it as needed. And if people need a follow-up and a debrief, absolutely we're going to have that conversation in a way that supports them. But if not, like I'm okay without the follow-up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the action that you took to get them to go speaks volumes. And then the fact that they had the experience, they would do all that processing, on their own. What this demonstrates to me, just hearing you talk about your students, is the amount of care that you have for your clients and the students. Then it really sounds like you were loving your students. You didn't want them to leave Australia, this once in a lifetime opportunity that they had. You cared enough to go bungee jumping. I mean, how many people would actually like, this is your have a little pep talk speech, and then if you still don't want to do it, fine. But Carrie says, no, 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 no. This really is your only opportunity. I'll go first for you. So that is some deep love for your clients and students.
Yeah, it's thank you. Let me first say that, Gabrielle, thank you for saying that. It's at the time, again, it was 20 plus years ago. So I wasn't as wise as I am now, but I wasn't thinking. I really wasn't thinking long term. I wasn't thinking about the bigger impact. It was simply, they like none of us will probably have this opportunity again. They should go, like they have to do this. And when I work with clients now, that's one of the things that I think about is this is an opportunity for you. I do everything I can to create a safe space, right? Whether we're live face to face or even on a virtual call, I do what I can to create a safe space and support them in ways that they need to say, let's take this risk. I'm with you in taking the risk. I'm with you so much that I'm going to like let a skeleton out of my closet on your behalf, or I'm going to be vulnerable and sharing something on in an effort to support you and your growth. I don't ever view it as me minimizing my experiences or revealing things that I don't want people to see, but rather it's a yet another opportunity for me to grow. Every time I do that, I take a deep breath. I'm like, okay, Carrie, like just share it with them. And so it strengthens me and my personal development, but yet it also serves another purpose in supporting them as well.
Yeah. Wow. So before you were today working for yourself on your own. You had another career, and then there was a moment where you decided to get your PhD in adult learning theory. Why did you make that decision? And did you envision then having your business and your business for yourself?
No, to the latter. But I'll circle back. So I always knew, well, there, I shouldn't say always, but there was a point early on in my career when I recognized I really wanted to work with older individuals, right? So like midlifers. And that spark, that level of interest it grew over time. And so as I was having multiple years of experiences with a certain population, right? So undergraduate students working with people in a very specific industry, I recognized like this is okay for right now, but I still have this yearning. And an opportunity presented itself. I think so many times in life and in our careers, when our back is against the wall, is when we are like, okay, we take stock and we make bold decisions. And for me, getting the PhD actually was the bold decision because it wasn't, I went back to school probably 25 years after I got my master's.
Mm.
And so it wasn't part of my plan, but it was out of necessity, quite honestly. It was out of necessity that I got it. And even trying to find, the line of work that I wanted to do with research and focusing on adult learning, I didn't know that language at the time. I thought I should pursue another line of study. And someone who is very thoughtful suggested, look at this adult learning thing over here. And that is what did it for me. I remember being in my first course, which was a workplace development course, and I would work in a full day of work and then go to class at night. And every night I felt like I was in personal therapy because, like I was learning things that I was experiencing, but yet I was learning the theories on at the foundation of what I was experiencing. I was looking at research, um, seminal research, as well as current research that helped explain what I was experiencing, what I was seeing in the workplace. And so I've taken all of that to say, what is happening or the way that people are conducting all types of trainings, there's a reason why they're doing it. And so that's part of the work that I do is get to the root of why are you creating your training or facilitating your training in this way. But then I incorporate the theory as a foundation to solidify the work that we do together so that when people are off on their own, they are fully empowered to take the reins and say, okay, I know exactly what to do because she shared that information with me. And more importantly, if my clients have an idea that they want to pursue in the future, they're empowered to do it. And again, that's the thing for me that's at the center, at the core of my work is that once you work with me, you should be able to do this on your own. If you're unable to do it on your own, I have failed.
Mm.
And I take that very seriously.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're not just helping people create effective trainings, but you're showing them the theory behind
Mhm.
why you're guiding them in this way, and also helping them understand for themselves why they designed the existing training that they may have, or why they have the idea that they may have. And then with all of that knowledge, that context, that's what enables them to do the process again on their own if they wanted to in the future.
With improvements, absolutely, with improvements. And so, it's, I have to share this. So last year, I had the opportunity to work with a client, a gentleman who works in finance. And he was like an A student, if I had to like, and he even said, he goes, Carrie, I've always been an A student. I'm like, okay, like this is business. No one's getting grades here. But he wanted to know what to change, like how to make the changes in the future and move on. And so that was the focus of whenever we were meeting, of our conversations. Later in the year, I ended up had a client who also had a PhD, but in a different area of study. And whenever we would have our meetings, she would always say, Carrie, so what's the theory that you're using to make this recommendation? And I was not threatened by it at all, but rather I was like, oh my goodness, this is someone who like we have different lines of interest, but she understands method, right? And so it's from a research perspective, she understands that every decision requires validation. And so we were able to have conversations that were just different. They were just different. And I've had other clients as well that, you know, they didn't have the terminal degree, but yet they were really interested in, well, why are you making this recommendation? And I'm like, well, let me tell you why. And so the more questions that people ask me, I have an obligation to answer them. And the reason I do that is because I have an expectation. If I ask someone a question, I expect them to answer me.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know? And it comes from my upbringing, right? My mother was like, if I ask you a question, the expectation is that you answer me. Regardless of what the answer is, you provide an answer.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you posted on your Instagram, I don't know, a while ago,
Yeah.
maybe elsewhere, but it was about you being, among other things, the only Black person or maybe person of color at all in your PhD program and in like professional conferences and things that you would attend. So what was that like? What was that experience like for you?
Wow. So many emotions. So for the most part, in my early education, like primary school, I was the only brown face. Halfway through, middle school and high school, I was not the only face, and I'm gonna say thankfully. But all of those students knew one another. But when I got to college, so as an undergraduate student, as a master's student, I was frequently the only non-white face. I don't even feel good about saying non-white, but only face that was brown. And it was challenging, quite honestly. It was challenging because I also went to college and my master's degrees were not in the region that I grew up.
Mm.
And so there was, this perception of who I should be, but I wasn't those things, right? Like, oh, you're from Connecticut, you come from money, and oh, you're Black and you should, that. And I didn't fit any of people's perceptions of who I should be. And so that was challenging. It was just challenging in a host of different ways. As a young professional, I entered a profession at the time. It was predominantly white and male, and I worked in college athletics, and as a healthcare provider, again, the only face. And in that environment, I felt like I was well respected. Um, it was in time, generally speaking, it was always in times of pressure or, when there was something significant happened that I really felt the eyes staring and the criticism. And then when I entered higher education, it was the same thing. As a faculty member, as a student myself, there were maybe one or two courses in my doctoral work that there were individuals of color, but for the most part, I was the only one, and it being in those situations for me always impacted my internal dialogue. I can't say that I've had anyone professionally, um, in a professional setting, outright be demeaning, disrespectful, and such. But it was typically my internal dialogue, and definitely looking at microaggressions, and as a woman, and as a person of color, and then as a woman of color. But my growth really came out of being in my head, and being an introvert, quite frankly. And so often I think people are quick to say, oh, you need to get out of your head, and oh, you just need to do X, Y, and Z, right? And I really wish people would stop saying that, particularly to my fellow introverts, because it's that being in our head of processing information, being very thoughtful of not so much as, well, what's the right word choice, but rather, why am I choosing to use these words in whatever the communication is. And so it's really, it has been a defining experience for me, being the only face of color. But it has also strengthened me. At some cost, yes, but I am fully confident to walk in a corporate setting, a room of older white men, and feel completely confident that I can navigate the room. And so that's, sort of the end result of what 50 years has been like for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I'm curious about this internal dialogue. So
Mhm.
can you tell me some more, like what were the thoughts that you were having, and then how did you?
Yeah, yeah. So there was always the thought of, and I can, yeah, I can honestly say always, the thought of judgment, right? Like, I'm being judged right now, whether it's my appearance, my dialect, my intellect, whatever the case may be. And for years earlier on, the internal dialect was about, what am I doing wrong? How can I fix it? Right. And, I've had some challenges in my career, and my personal life, that led me to therapy. And that's when I learned about, oh, this thing called an internal dialect. Like, what is that? And for me, I realized that that conversation in my head was not positive, and it was self-defeating. And it wasn't until really therapy that I recognized I can still have the internal dialogue, I should say, but what is the dialogue? And so, like, on the other side of that, it was, okay, Carrie, like, first I would say, like, am I crazy right now? Like, is it just me, or like, and then I realized, like, okay, this is not my issue. This is their issue. Let me, with some level of emotional intelligence, let me navigate this space. What is the best thing to say or do? How is an appropriate, how should I do that? And why am I going to do that? With the why being like, what's the outcome? And so, the even now, like, that, having the internal dialogue, it's really about assessing the situation. How can I move through the situation, whatever it is, in a way that feels authentic to who I truly am, as well as do service, like be of service, whether it's to another individual or not. And so it's, sometimes it's exhausting. I will say that sometimes it's exhausting. Like in times for me, it's public networking events, and so when I'm in those instances, um, I have to take a nap afterwards. And it's because I am having engaging in conversation with people, but I'm at the same time I'm having an internal dialogue, and that's a lot of cognitive effort.
Yeah.
And I've learned, in the last 10 years that is what's happening for me. And that's how I navigate the world. And it's fine.
Mhm.
But I now know, okay, when it's done, I need to have a snack and I need to take a nap. And like, I got married a couple of years ago, um, and my husband has now learned that about me, as like we learned it together, like, oh, okay, so that's what's happened. Like, oh, okay, well, I'll see you later, go take your nap, right? Right. And then I'm refreshed, right? And I can move on. And so it's learning, like all of that is an illustration of literally lifelong learning for me. It is how do I function in the world as I change, as my surroundings evolve, right? And it's an interesting journey. And I encourage everyone to view learning in that capacity, not simply, oh, I need to learn a skill or a hobby or go back to school, but it's rather everyday life. How do you learn what to do?
Yeah. So when it comes to being a person of color, or specifically a Black person, I'm from the Bahamas, you're American, and we have our own, like there's some overlap obviously in Black culture generally. And I'm wondering if you've noticed over the years, or maybe while you were in school, anything that made you think, maybe this theory would apply slightly differently for Black communities because of these reasons, or maybe the application of these theories would be different for Black people or people of color because of these reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So the adult learning theory was originally um, presented by Malcolm Knowles. So it's in the 50s, right? So it is aged. Malcolm Knowles is a white man, right? Like, and I am so thankful that over the years there have been scholars, some who look like you and I, and some who don't, men and women, who have taken the theories, like the adult learning theory, and matched it, or I should say, compared it to the Black experience, the woman experience, the Black woman's experience, to say, does it fit? So
Mm.
I haven't had to do that work. Others have done that work. And there is a lot of research out. Oh, I shouldn't say a lot. There's a fair amount of research out there that identifies, does the theory still stick? Yes, it does. However, it's the application that needs to be um, shifted, right, so to speak. And so if you're looking at, let's just take workplace learning, many people will say, or many businesses will say, well, we offer learning, training opportunities to everyone,
Mhm.
right? Okay, that's okay. Let's break that down, right? And so, for some individuals in the workplace, they have mentors. Typically, it's men that have mentors. And again, for all who are listening and watching, I am providing wide sweeping generalizations, but there is research to back them up. So they have mentors. Men typically have mentors. White men typically have leadership mentors in the workplace, and that's because of the mentoring that programs in corporations, right? So for him, he has direct access to training, okay? Because let's say it's a training that you have to be sponsored. If you have a mentor, your mentor is going to sponsor you. But as a woman, right, or a Black woman, typically we don't have mentors in the workplace. We may have mentors, but they're outside the organization. So we are not being sponsored to access that same training. And again, it's like there's systems at play that are beyond this conversation, but it's things like that, right? Or, oh, we're gonna have a training from 5 to 8 p.m., after work hours. Come to a networking cocktail happy hour, right? Okay. People who don't have children, right? Or individuals who can afford childcare. They may have access to go, but people who have to pick up their children or someone else during those hours, or even in culturally speaking, individuals who do not drink alcohol or place themselves in environments where alcohol is served. They now don't have access.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about workplace learning in particular, like those are some of the conversations I have with people. It's not simply, oh, we offer it, but it's let's talk about the end user in a way that moves beyond their role and their demographic information. And when I say demographic information, I mean like their skin color, their age, and that's about it. Like we need to dig deeper about and learn more, or at least understand more about who our end users are so that we can create things that actually support them.
Mm. So when you are working with your clients, how much would you say is that a big part of the learning development process, and how much of it is, well, this is the curriculum and how do I make the curriculum better?
Yeah, that there was a point in time where I was doing, you just want to know how to make it better, here's how you make it better. And it just didn't resonate with me. And so now my clients come to me with some degree of content, right? Whether it's old content that needs a refresh or content that's they have, but it's not organized in a cohesive manner. Conversations about their end users are the very first conversations that we have, and they are in depth and they're lengthy. So it's um, my clients who have extensive amounts of content, that conversation is extensive. For individuals who don't have a significant amount of content, we still have that conversation. Like, okay, let's talk about, tell me, who are your end users? Um, that conversation is still there. I remember I had this one client who I love dearly to this day. I love to reconnect with her. Her business was well over 10 years old. And in our first conversation, we discussed who her end users were. That conversation ended up spanning 4 sessions. So 4 hours of conversation about them. And it was simply because she was devoted to getting it right. And her clients, her end users had slightly changed, and it was a new concept for her. And so that very first conversation was like, you tell me who they are. And like that was just, it was a lot for her. And then it was, okay. And then I started asking my questions. Well, tell me more about them, right? Tell me X, Y, and Z about them. And she didn't know the answer. And so for her, it was, all right, we're going to stop this meeting. I'm going to go like figure some things out and come back to you and answer the question. And it was because she really wanted to get it right. And she did. She's had a great return.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And it makes me think about how little it seems like, as a person who creates content and wants people to consume content, it's easy to focus on yourself and what
Yes.
needs to be translated and what
Yeah.
you want the result to be, and spend so much time there because there's a lot of effort that goes into that. But
Mhm.
what you're describing and saying is necessary is that there's so much, at least as much time needs to be taken considering the end user, the person that's going to be receiving the content, and your relationship with them and everything else along.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be a lot of work. I try to make things as easy for people and inspiring as possible, right? No one wants to do the thing they don't want to do. But it's when you are thinking about educating or informing individuals, you can just put information out there. I have a very good friend. He used to say, "Oh, you're serving it up on a silver platter of smoke." And if you think about it, right? Oh, it's delivered beautifully. It's on a silver platter, but it's smoke. Like it's just wafting in the air. Like you can't contain it. And so it's when you are really educating and instructing people on a particular body of knowledge or skill set, it becomes easier for you if you focus on them in the development stage, as opposed to, oh, I'm Dr. Carrie Graham. They should just be happy I'm present, right? Or focusing solely on the content, right? Oh, the government has put out a new updated thing. I got to train. You really have to get at the crux of who are they? What do they have capacity to learn? And if you build everything around that, it gets easy. Like it literally is easy. You're not guessing, well, what should come first, what should come second. They will tell you. They will tell you. And for example, I can sit through I can watch something on the History Channel. I talk about this publicly a lot, that I love to watch things about building bridges and like heavy equipment and things like that, right? Like and up to a degree, I get it. Like I get it. I can follow along. I understand how the machine works, so on and so forth. But there's usually one point where I meet my threshold and I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And now I'm just looking because the equipment
A
looks
cool
cool.
bridge.
Yeah, right. Like it just looks cool. So I'm just going to keep watching. But your clients, your end users are the same way. Like you have to match their capacity. I watch, my husband really is annoyed with me, but I watch surgeries on YouTube all the time,
I didn't know
right?
you could do that.
I do. I happen to do it late, right? So I'm like, ooh, right? But I get it. I know exactly what is happening. I know the body, like I know anatomy in that regard. I understand what happens with bleeding and clotting and cell development and cell turnover. I understand all that. So I'll just sit and I'm like, yep, I know what they're doing. I know, yep, Application, nobody wants me to do their surgery. No one.
How many videos have you watched, Carrie? That's nice. I still don't want you to do my surgery.
Right, right. But it's the same, like it's the same thing, right? So like for me, I'm watching it because I haven't seen it. Oh, let me learn something, like some new information about the human body. But that's all it is I'm learning, I'm consuming and processing information. There's no application, like opportunity for me to apply what it is that I'm seeing and learning.
Yeah, and then I think from just reading your website and your models, there's application, then there's the retention, and was it engagement? Sorry, there's application, engagement, and retention, right? Those are the three key.
those are the three. Let's get them in order,
Yes.
right? Okay. So the order, right? The people always come first. So we
Okay.
want to engage them, right? We don't want to entertain people. We really want to engage them. And you engage them through understanding their capacity, understanding who they are, things like that. So we
That's
want
like the conversation we were having,
to.
that your preliminary conversations with your clients.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's the engagement piece. The second piece is retention, right? So it's how are we constructing the information so that they can retain it, right? That is really important. It's not simply just putting together a bunch of worksheets or videos or like whatever people want to, games, whatever you want to use. There needs to be some level of logic in there that supports their learning, not supporting just anyone random person's learning. It's the person who's going to be using it. So you
Mm-hmm.
want to support their learning for retention because we do what we remember, right? And that's where the application comes in. And so it's also providing people opportunities to practice, helps with application when they need to apply it. So it's engagement, retention, application.
Okay. Great. That's
Yes.
perfect. Um, I want to learn a little bit more about this line that you have on your website about not being a traditional African American woman. So I think this relates to what you were saying earlier about the perspectives that people had, the
Mhm.
assumptions that they made based on you being a Black woman from Connecticut, and you didn't fit them. So what are some other ways that you didn't fit or don't fit in the traditional box?
Yeah. So I am about to be vulnerable for the world to see, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for asking this question. Not really, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Because my mother, even though I'm 51, my mother always taught me when people ask you questions, you answer them. So, one of the things that an assumption that a lot of people make about me is they're like, oh, you're on podcasts and you've presented at national and international conferences. That must be really easy for you. And my answer is no. I actually, like, it's not my thing. I do it. I love having conversation with people. Um, that I absolutely love. But being on a main stage, it's not my thing. I would much rather fly under the radar. The power behind moving things forward. That is something that always surprises me when this topic comes up and they're really surprised that, oh, I never would have guessed that about you. Um, my family knows, my siblings and such, they all know, but not
Yeah.
public. Yeah, that's one thing. Um, but then also something that people don't know or probably don't know about me is that I have a high risk tolerance. And so there are some things that I'm quietly thinking about that are risky, and I'm perfectly comfortable doing them. Like I'm comfortable with how uncomfortable it will make me feel. And
Mhm.
so I'm willing to do them. Bungee jumping was one
I
of them.
was literally, if she doesn't say bungee jumping, I'm going to.
Yeah, bungee jumping is one of them. So while that wasn't like on my bucket list, skydiving has always been on my bucket list.
Can I say I've done it and it's incredible? You have to. I feel like it's way less like scary than bungee jumping. That might sound odd, but I feel like bungee jumping is next level. Skydiving is going to be easy for you.
I thank you. Thank you so much. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. There's that level of risk. But there's also, I took a job in like the opposite coast, and much like you, like literally left everything that I was familiar with and understood for an adventure to live in a new location, like a completely different part of the country, alone. I didn't have any sort of network or support system there. And it was a risk for my life and who I am. It was a risk, but I was like, I want to take it. The worst thing that could happen is that I don't like it and I go home. Right. And even now I tell people the same thing. This world that we live in, it's so huge. There's so many opportunities. Like, explore it, because the worst that can happen is you don't like it and you go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just go home, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I tell myself, just go to that networking event. Like, just go, Carrie. If you don't like it, you can just go home.
It's really terrible. Just slip out.
Nice and quiet. And so that, those are things about me that, well, now people on LinkedIn know, but, for the most part, people don't know those things about me. And it's not until people really sit down and get to know me that they're like, oh, okay, you're that one crazy person that's up all hours of the night watching a surgery. You're the one who's jumping like off platforms in other countries. Like, but it makes for good stories.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, on paper, when you read about this unknown PhD, like doctor of adult learning theory, the person you would imagine would be very conservative, like not planning on jumping off of any platforms or moving across the country or any of the things that we've talked about. But you prove that you can be both. You can be complex as a human.
Absolutely. It's yesterday I was telling my son, he was having some health complications, and I was like, life is all about choices. Sometimes I really want a glass of wine, but I know that it's not the best thing, at night for me at this stage in my life. And so I have to make a choice. I'm either going to have a glass of wine at noon, or I'm not going to have it. The same holds true with the donut that I ate yesterday. I knew I shouldn't have eaten it as late as I did, but I made the choice. Like, okay, I really want to eat this donut at 9 o'clock at night while I'm watching this
surgery.
And so,
the ultimate Tuesday night.
Right. And so this morning I was sluggish, and, going for my morning walk was a bit of a struggle, but, it was the choice that I made. And so, to go back to your point, I think for me, I view life as an adventure. And with that adventure, I'm always looking and wondering about things that I haven't had opportunities to do before. Some of them risky, some of them ultra conservative.
Yeah. And there's beauty in both
There
of them.
is. There is. I was feeling pretty beautiful last night eating my donut and watching surgery. Like,
in the comfort of your own home.
of my own home, with my husband rolling his eyes at me, right?
Yeah. So another thing that I know is really important to you and probably enables you to take the risks that you do is your faith. And I would imagine that informs the love that we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation. And how else does your faith support you in your business or just the decisions that you make, in your life?
Yeah. So, earlier I had shared about that internal dialogue, like early in my career, where it was not the healthiest internal dialogue. And when I started consulting full time, my business, there was a point, like early days, I want to say like the first couple weeks, where I had to make a decision. And it was a pretty significant, like, financial decision. And I was like, oh, let me pick up my phone and see who I can call. And very split second, I realized, like, why am I seeking? And no one was available, right? The hand of God, no one was available. But I'm like, why am I seeking other people's validation of a decision for my business? And that's when not when I realized, but it was a great reminder that I am a child of God. He has already validated me and be like in all things, in all ways. I have the ultimate validation. And I don't need anyone else's yes to do whatever it is that I want to do. And as someone who has never like hadn't owned a business before and really didn't know anyone else that had owned a business, that was huge for me. It really was huge. The to see who I am, whose I am as I run my business. Um, and and so my faith being in business for myself has really um, helped me strengthen my faith and recognize that God is truly in every aspect of my work. And there are times when like most people running a business, Gabrielle, there are highs and lows. And for me, it's in the low that I'm often reminded of my faith. Or not that I'm reminded of my faith, but that I lean on my faith to
Mhm.
say, like, God, I do not understand what's going on. I feel like I'm like, why is the technology yet again not working for me, Lord? Right? It's in everyday things that I say, God, like, I don't know how to do this. I need you to either fix it for me, show me how to do it, or pull someone in my sphere that can do it for me. And it has really been a joyous experience for me because yet another secret. Um, you know, for a large part of my life, I struggled with having faith in God. I always believed that God existed, but struggled with having faith in God. And I don't. I know that everything that has happened in my life and that is happening and that will happen, He is orchestrating, right? He is orchestrating, and and so I don't worry about anything anywhere near as much as I used to. Again, because the God that I serve, His word says that He will protect me. His word says that He is going to be a provider. He is a comforter, and so with that, like I don't have to worry about it. It'll get figured out. Right? Like sometimes I'm like, it'll get figured out. It like we don't need to worry about that, right? And that allows me to be bold. It encourages me to take risks that I wouldn't have otherwise. Actually, Monday I sent an email. I'm not going to say what it is or to who, but I sent an email and I was like, God, I don't. Why won't like I need to do something, and the action on my part was to send an email. When I tell you that thing has paid off like fourfold
Wow.
yesterday and even today, like I got additional responses to the email um, that are beneficial. And so it's in all things, in things when I'm in the valley, my faith and my belief in God has really been helpful. And even when I'm on a high and things are going really well, acknowledge acknowledging, God, thank you for doing that for me. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for protecting me from whatever. Um, it it always pays off. It
Mhm.
always pays off. And so really I don't. There was a point in my life, honestly, where I wasn't as forthcoming about my faith and my belief in God. And now, because it is truly the driver of my life, and central to all things that I do and that I touch. When people want to have a conversation about my faith, I'm happy to. I'm happy to. Um, I don't come to meetings with my Bible in hand and a crucifix in the other. Like, I don't do it, but my Bible is nearby, right? And so that's how I function and how my faith has been guiding me.
Yeah. Wow. Um, my final question is about speaking of risks, right? The risk that people take when they think, yeah, I have to do this training, but I don't really need to consult with or think about adult learning.
Mhm.
So you work with, for people, yeah, everyone that's not really familiar, you've worked with really big companies and then also small business owners, companies that want to work on training their employees, and then business owners that are creating digital courses or whatever materials for their clients. So you've seen the spectrum.
Yeah.
And talking to you, learning what I have through the course of our conversation, it's apparent that just having love for your employees or care for your clients, it's good, but it's not necessarily enough. And so what is it that someone would risk if they're like, well, might be nice, but not really necessary?
Yeah. Most people are concerned. There's a couple things. People are concerned about the bottom line and losing money, um, whether it's losing out on revenue or wasting money. So people are concerned about that. Some people are concerned about their reputation, right? So particularly if it's a smaller business, like their reputation, their forward-facing reputation. Um, so in those instances, when you continue to not focus or not make strategic decisions about your training, what happens is you end up losing money. If this is your onboarding and employee training, and either you don't do them or you don't do them well, individuals are going to leave your organization, or they're going to continue to make mistakes within your organization. In either case, it's going to cost you money, right? As it relates to your reputation, if you have people who are watching your training or doing your training and they are not achieving a goal, right? Whether they set the goal or someone else set the goal for them, but the training doesn't support them in achieving the goal, they're going to have some words. And the danger is you don't know who those words are going to be shared with. And so from a reputation perspective, um, it, it will follow you. It will follow you. Oh, so and so has great ideas. Yeah, but their training it doesn't really do anything. Like, I don't want that for anyone. And I also don't want people losing out on revenue. But for me, more importantly, it's for the end user, right? It's for the employees or the clients. They've set aside money, they're setting aside time to participate in this training. They deserve to get a return. And the return is either knowledge or skills.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a significant loss. One example, Gabrielle, that I don't like to offer, but I think it makes this point. I worked at an institution who, and this is when I realized, not one of the pivotal points when I realized there was a significant issue here. This institution, I was attending their their annual, so it's offered every single year, their annual sexual harassment training. About 200 other individuals were present as well. I look around, people are sleeping, they're on their phones, they're engaged in conversation during the training. At the same time, this institution was in litigation, very public litigation around a sexual harassment case. There's a problem.
Huge disconnect. Yeah.
Right. And so they're losing money in litigation, being in litigation, whatever resources, like whatever money was spent on resources to hold the training, right? While people were not at work, they weren't being productive, right? That's a loss, a financial loss. The institution's reputation, because they were in litigation, is at risk. And the current employees, their view of the trainings that this institution puts forth, not what you want.
Yeah. So that is a really sobering example, but maybe a follow-up and more positive question would be about AI and how that's coming in to transform our whole world. And I think it's maybe easier for people to imagine AI in a classroom with children,
Yeah.
or in high schoolers, or even in universities. But what about AI with adults? Have you considered that, or what's the conversation happening there?
I get a little when that conversation, when that topic comes up. But on my walk this morning, while I was working out the donut, one of the things that that holds true is from a information gathering perspective, AI potentially has its place. However, if we're thinking about adult learning, there's only so much information you can give the system about your end user. If you are developing a training and let's say you are a coach or a consultant, like you have intimate interaction and intimate knowledge of who, you can't put all of that information in an AI bot or system that can adequately spit out a training for you. The same holds true with a large corporation. If you are using AI to build, there's such intricacies of the organizational culture, of the organizational trends that are happening that all influence the end user and how they are going to process and get through the training. So I've finally come to the place where I can say there's a place for AI. However, you don't want to leave the AI to developing it as a whole, and be very careful as you are building to meet a specific client base, a specific end user.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel like we could just keep going. But yeah, there have been so many, for me, valuable takeaways. So I'm going to maybe name a couple for people when they're thinking about this conversation. Highlights maybe would be in terms of loving your clients and that being central to effectively connecting with them and helping them. So on the sort of business side of things, and then on the personal side of things, your faith and how that enables you to take risks. And then I'm going to let you say this part because I don't want to get it wrong. The three key elements in order of, yeah.
Okay. I kind of want to be like, Gabrielle, come on now, you can do. And
So I'll do it. Engagement.
Yes, that's the first one. And what is that alluding to?
That is getting people's attention and helping them to connect with the material.
Yeah, that's it. So engagement.
Then there's retention.
Absolutely. And what does
So
that encompass?
making sure that they remember what they've learned so that
Yeah.
they can, number 3, apply. Application. Yay! So these are the 3 core elements to
Yeah.
learning, to
Yeah.
effective learning.
Yeah. They are the 3 core elements that I want to share with the world.
Mhm.
There are other elements, but given the individuals that are close and dear to my heart, those are the 3 key elements that are missing consistently,
Mhm.
and I want to gift it to the world.
Yes. Okay. Well, is there anything that you would like to leave with our audience? And how can they connect with you if they would like to hire you to help them develop their trainings?
Yeah, well, we're here on LinkedIn, and so definitely reach out to me, send me a direct message. But I encourage people to look at my website. There is so much information there. You can find the website at drdcarriegraham.com. There are blog posts that are about, different elements of what we've talked about today. And there's also a free download, a training assessment, which I developed. And it's a great starting point to get people thinking about doing things differently.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carrie, and to everyone who has been watching us. And I will see you all here next week for another interview on the Summer of